Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of an update on my Read Harder challenge. I posted my 2016 goals update video a week ago now, I believe. I'll have a link to that so you guys can check that out if you haven't seen it already. And one of the things I mentioned was how I was doing the Read Harder challenge and how I'm a little bit behind. And someone left a comment saying, could I talk about the books that I read specifically for the Read Harder challenge, or in the future when I read a book that fits a challenge to talk about that or to mention that. So I thought a good way to sort of retroactively do that is to go through the challenges that I've fulfilled so far and talk a little bit about the books that I had read for that challenge. Now for a lot of these challenges there are multiple books that I've read over the course of the year that could technically fit into these challenges, but the way I do the Read Harder challenge is just as soon as I read one book that fits the challenge, or the first book that I read that fits that challenge, I put into that category. Sometimes I switch around which books fulfill which category if I'm having a harder time fulfilling one over the other, because books can sometimes fulfill multiple roles here. But yeah, I'm just going to run through these really quickly and talk about them because I've talked about all of them at least at some point in a monthly wrap-up. And these are definitely not in the order that I read them, they're literally just in the order that I have them listed in my bullet journal. So the first challenge was read a Hoarder book, and for that one I read The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. I read that I believe back in January, which now that I'm thinking about it feels like forever ago that I read that book. If you're someone who doesn't read a lot of horror because you're a big scaredy cat like me, I highly recommend this book because it's a little bit freaky, but it's not super freaky. It's very plot heavy and it's a little bit bonkers, so it makes the scary part seem not as scary. If you're someone who wants something that's super fast paced and super engaging, I highly recommend this book. You do have to suspend disbelief a little bit, but I feel like that's just par for the course with any horror book. Next up I have read a nonfiction book about science, and for that one I put in The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, which was released this year. Siddhartha Mukherjee is a very well-known nonfiction science writer. The Gene follows, obviously, the gene, genetics and code. It's a 600-page book, and it's a super deep dive into the history of genetics and how the science and the study of it has evolved over the course of time. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoy his style of writing because I feel like he makes science topics really approachable and understandable, even if you're someone who doesn't have a very strong background in science. The next challenge is to read aloud to someone. This is really easy for me because I have nieces and nephews, so I just picked the first book that I read aloud to my niece, and that was Madeline. Classic kids novel. Don't really have a hard time with that challenge. Next up I have read a book that is over 500 pages long, and the first one that I read that crossed that mark was Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is the second book by her that I had read. I read Purple Hibiscus last year. I like Purple Hibiscus a whole lot more, but again, it's still Adichie, so it's really hard to just hate any of her novels. And then next I have read a book that is under 100 pages, and for this I read Binti by Nandita Korafor. It was really hard for me to find a story that is less than 100 pages long because I feel like all of the short books that I have are at least 100 pages. So once I realized that Binti was 98 pages, I was like, yes. Awesome. This is a science fiction story that follows this girl named Binti who is the first of her sort of species to be able to attend this really elite school. I like this story. I didn't love it. It's a novella, and I feel like I just wanted more from the story because, again, it's so short. But there are more parts coming out from Nandita Korafor, so I'll probably be picking those up in the future. Next I have read a story that is set in the Middle East, and for this I put Honor by Elif Shafak, which I have right here. It's one of the best books that I've read so far this year. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I will link to my review if you are interested in that. But this story takes place in Turkey, or at least partially takes place in Turkey. Next I have read a book by a Southeast Asian author, and for this I did Man Tiger by Eka Kurinawan. I read this back in the spring and I loved it. It was such a fantastic book. I will try to link to the specific video where I talk about this book because I'm not going to do it justice here, but I highly recommend it. It's only 100 and something pages. It's less than 200, I know that for sure. It's super short, super fantastic. It's a story that starts at one point in time and then flashes back, and then you move forward through time again up into that point again, and the story that you think you are reading when you start the book is definitely not the story that you realize that you have read by the end of the book. It's just completely well done, very well structured. I highly recommend it. Then we have read a historical fiction book that is set before the 1900s, and for this I used The Good Lord Bird by James McBride, which I again really enjoyed. I think I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was very clever, a lot funnier than I thought it was going to be. This book takes place, I believe, during the Civil War, and it's about this black boy who gets mistaken for a girl and basically has to pretend like he is a girl for his own survival sort of thing, and then it just sort of goes past the point of no return where he can't really figure out how to not pretend to be a girl anymore and to, like, you know, survive. And then the final challenge that I fulfilled is to read a book that is the first in a series by an author of color. And for this one I used Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho. I read this, I believe, back in January or February. It was pretty early on in the year. I liked it. I wasn't super crazy about it. The style of writing isn't really my preferred style of writing. I've realized that anytime a book is described as being Dickensian, it's not for me because I don't like Dickens. I don't know why I keep doing this. Like, I keep picking up books that are described as Dickensian because I'm like, oh, that's such a positive description, and then I'm like, oh right, I hate that style of writing. So again, it's not a bad story at all. Actually, the actual storyline I really enjoyed, and part of me does kind of want to see what happens in the future, but just the style is just not my thing. So yeah, those are all of the books that I have read that have fulfilled various challenges in the Read Harder challenge. Like I said in my goal update video, I'm behind, but I'm also kind of like in the middle of books or have books coming up in the queue that could fulfill a lot of these challenges. As you're watching this video, or as this video goes live, this is going to be in the middle of the Booktubeathon, and a bunch of those books that I picked out for the Booktubeathon also specifically work for the Read Harder challenge. I'm currently reading the Alexander Hamilton biography, and one of the challenges is to read a biography, so once I finish that, that'll work for that. I'm supposed to read a book that is written in the same decade that you were born in. I was born in the 80s, and I'm reading House on Mango Street, which was published in 1984, so that'll work for that. And then one of the Read Harder challenges is to read a book to movie adaptation and to also watch the adaptation, which is exactly what a Booktubeathon challenge is. So if I complete that, then I will complete another Read Harder challenge. So I think if I do all of that, I will actually catch up to where I'm supposed to be at this point, or I might be a little bit behind still, but I'm working really hard to sort of catch up on challenges over the next couple of months so that way I can actually complete this, because it's kind of fun to find books that fit these challenges. So if you are participating in the Read Harder challenge, feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know how you guys are doing with it. If you need any book recommendations, there is actually a Read Harder challenge Goodreads group, if you weren't aware, and so there are like topics for each of the challenges, and people are putting in like what books they're reading or recommendations for books. And now at the month-end wrap-ups, I'll try my best to sort of mention whenever I read a book that also fulfills a Read Harder challenge. Sometimes I like forget to update my list, so that's why I haven't been mentioning them monthly, but I'll try to be more on top of that in the future. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.